So, werte Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen zurück hier auf unserer Mainstage beim Berlin Travel Festival. Toll, dass ihr alle da seid an diesem Samstag und euch Zeit genommen habt für jede Menge Inspiration. Wir haben für euch Menschen eingeladen, die aus verschiedensten Teilen der Welt angereist sind, um ihre Geschichten mit euch zu teilen. Jetzt geht's nach Afrika, a journey through the dead heart of Africa, und zwar in den Tschad. Reza Pakravan kommt hier gleich auf die Bühne. Filmemacher, Entdecker, Autor. Er reist um die Welt und auch gerne, sagt er, an Orte, wo andere nicht so gerne hinreisen. Zum Beispiel in die Sahara oder in den Regenwald, zum Amazonas. Und in diesem Fall ist er in den Tschad gegangen und hat dort Unglaubliches und Tolles erlebt. Das wird er gleich hier zeigen und erzählen. Und seine Filme werden gezeigt überall auch, bei der BBC, bei Channel 4, bei Al Jazeera, bei Fox. Und er wird danach auch für ein Book-Signing draußen noch sein und macht euch auch einen Freundschaftspreis, wenn ihr mögt. Und sein Film wird morgen auch nochmal dort oben beim Screening gezeigt. Der heißt Cup to Cape, wo er im Grunde unseren Globus mit dem Fahrrad abgeradelt hat, von Norden nach Süden. Aber ich will jetzt nicht so lange quatschen, denn der Mann steht in den Startlöchern. Viel Vergnügen mit A Journey Through the Dead Heart of Africa, Tschad.
And this is nature at its wildest. Monkey doesn't have a huge amount of meat.
It's hot! Baking hot!
I'm not sure if I can do another day of this.
A couple of days more like this, I'm just finished.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's so nice to be here in Berlin at Berlin Travel Festival. And how's everyone doing? How's your festival has been? Any response? Today is all about celebrating travel, and I've been lucky that my job has enabled me to travel to far-flung and out-of-the-way places on the planet. And at the beginning of my career, I chased chest-beating, record-breaking journey to be the first and the fastest to cycle the length of the planet, be the first one to cycle the Sahara Desert. But in recent years, my work has been mainly focused on documenting the impact of environmental issues and outside forces on indigenous people. For example, in my last journey, I traveled to the headwaters of the Amazon to document the impact of illegal logging, narcos, and illegal gold mining on the Amazonian tribes. So how does Tschad fit into all of this? What do we know about Tschad? Tschad is the land of extreme. Its location on the center of the continent with its harsh climate, has earned its reputation the dead heart of Africa. The country is a landlocked, right at the north-central Africa. It has 3 geographical zones. The Sahara zone in the north, the Sahelian belt in the middle, and the more fertile savanna in the south. Its main language is Arabic and French. Its main religion is Islam, followed by Christianity. So all of these are pretty much statistics that you can find in Wikipedia. What do we know about the reality of life for those who call Tschad their home? When I was searching on internet before I go to Chad, these are the words that I came across quite often. Civil war, a failed state, coup, bandit, armed robbery, humanitarian crisis. My job as a filmmaker and an explorer is to tell untold stories, and perhaps providing people with alternative narrative to what they hear on mainstream media. For example, what we don't know about Chad is one of the most diverse countries in the world. There are 200 languages spoken in Chad. And perhaps its diversity has been the most obstacle in creating a national identity. No countries in the world have seen civil war like Chad. And as it started to become stabilized in recent years, it came under attack by Boko Haram. So all of these elements has led to Chad become one of the least developed countries in the world. I heard this word least developed many times, but I actually didn't understand what it means before I stepped into Chad. My journey started in Lake Chad. Chad was actually named for a mistake. In the 1900s, when the European explorers arrived at a vast marshy bank of the vast body of water, because the local called that area Chad, the Europeans called it Lake Chad and drew it on the map. But actually, Chad in local language means lake. So there you go, Lake Chad or Lake. So to get to Lake Chad wasn't an easy task. Upon arrival in the capital, in N'Djamena, didn't take long for me to realize, actually, there is no public transport operating in a country. How do I get there? So finally, after the only way to get there was using a rickety old propeller plane that operated by the UN, carrying humanitarian staff to Lake Chad. So after 3 days of begging and sitting in so many security meeting and telling me it's so dangerous to go there and do not go there, finally I managed to secure a seat on this plane. So finally the plane took off from the capital in N'Djamena. As the plane left the capital, I looked outside and all I could see was bare desert. But as I got closer to Lake Chad, I looked outside and I was expecting to see a vast body of uninterrupted body of water. But the reality was different. This is what the Lake Chad looks like these days. Lake Chad, over the past decades, has shrunk to 95% of its original size. And as the desert encroaching further every year, the families find it more difficult to make a living of fishing, agriculture, and livestock farming. And about 10 million people living on the verge of breakdown, and they depend on humanitarian aid to survive. The plane landed in Bol. Bol is a little town on the edge of the lake. When I stepped out of the plane, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. All my senses came to life. The sound, the smell, the sight. I've traveled in more than 80 countries in the world, and many of them has been developing countries, but I have never seen anything like it. You could hardly spot a motorized vehicle. It's nothing. People simply walked. The richer ones used camel and donkeys, and the majority of people just simply walked. The streets were nothing but a desert track and really deep sand. It was really difficult to walk. This is the national road, effectively. if you look at Google Map, it's a yellow, prominent, like national road. It's got a number. So I started my journey in Lake Chad and started to walk. And life at 45 degrees temperature is punishing, especially when you're trying to do such a demanding physical activity, carrying 20 kilos of rucksack behind you. Really, really difficult. So finally, after lots of sweat and tears, I managed to hitch a lift from a convoy carrying aid. And given what the region is going through at the moment, finding a convoy like this was no rarity. So I hitched a ride with that convoy and started talking to one of the humanitarian staff. And perhaps to understand what's going on in Lake Chad, we need to really understand the geography of Lake Chad. Lake Chad is located between 4 countries: Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. It's such a remote place. It's perhaps the most remote place I've ever been in my life. And I've been to few remote places. Because Lake Chad is shared between these 4 countries, the people of Lake Chad, they don't feel that they belong to any of these countries. So they don't feel that they belong in any of these countries. So they don't even have a national identity card. And as far as their government concerned, the people who are living in the Lake Chad area are effectively, they don't even exist, because Lake Chad is so far away from their capital city. So this is a little ecosystem we're talking about. It's so isolated, and everything happens within that ecosystem. So rather than actually me talking to you and describing it, perhaps let me show you what's going on there at the moment.
Just in March alone, 7,000 people have come to Chad, escaping civil war, militia, and armed conflicts. These people are from Mayokipi Island, and they came here because islands were too insecure to stay and continue their life.
We are here to understand the life of women and children who are refugees or displaced caused by Boko Haram.
This is the reality of Chad.
They're really amazing because even all these things that they face, they keep smiling.
And they were truly smiling, which was really inspiring. So I finally arrived in Bagasola, which was my destination. Bagasola was another town on the edge of the Lake Chad, and it used to be a center of trade back in the days. Fishing was rife, livestock exported to Nigeria. Islanders used to come here from far and wide to trade their goods. But today, the picture that you see behind me is the extent of economic activities that's happening in Bagasola. This is it. This is all the trades that's happening in there. So in the absence of any meaningful accommodation, I made an arrangement with Oxfam to spend time at their compound. Camping was not an option due to the security issue. And soon I realized my movements are going to be very limited because I couldn't get, because I have to sit on many security meetings with Oxfam staff running through the security protocol. And my arrival coincided with the weekend, so I couldn't get hold of any convoy. Therefore, I had to stay in a compound. But on a plus side, I had a luxury. And the luxury was a really nice flat screen television. And perhaps watching the royal wedding in the luxury of Oxfam compound in Bagasola was one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. The juxtaposition of two settings was dizzying. So often in these kind of trips, the people that you meet along the way, they have the most impact. And sometimes they change the course of the journey. I met Henry, the guy on the left-hand side. Henry is a Cameroonian guy helping humanitarian organizations and NGOs around Lake Chad. So Henry was there to go as remote as possible to identify vulnerable women in tribes of Lake Chad to introduce them to NGOs. We got on really well. There's such a great sense of humor, great guy. And I couldn't find a better way to understand the tribal way of living in Lake Chad, but to embed myself in Henry's mission. Monday morning, on a crack of dawn, we left the compound. These are the villages that you see around Lake Chad. Arriving at different villages were shock to the system. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like going back in history by 100 years. It was really shocking because there was no sign of modernity. The modern world has never made it to like these villages. And lack of modern tools felt especially. It was nothing motorized. For example, fishermen were using these pirogues and the paddling for days to fish, long distances to fish and come back. The majority of the villages are mainly formed based on ethnicity. The main ethnic groups around Lake Chad are Buduma, Bugurmi, and Kanembu. And they distinguish by the scar on their faces. For example, this guy is Buduma, and at his initiation, when he's young, when he gets to the coming of age time, he received this scar. So he's got 1 in the middle and 4 on each of his cheeks. So that distinguishes him from the rest of the tribes. And I've seen many indigenous people around the world, and I've seen the rapid changes in their way of living by the ever-encroaching imposition of the modern world. And yet, the Lake Chad tribes seem to have no connection with outside world whatsoever. They seem like they've been left out and completely disconnected. And the reason is obvious, because the place is so remote and is so hard to get to that make the connection with the outside world is impossible. So in this type of journeys, surprises always the best, and they are the most exciting part. And finding a Catholic church in the middle of nowhere was definitely the highlight to remember. By no means I'm a religious person, but being in that church was something about that church. Between all that grimness, all of a sudden finding this, better I'm not talking about it, and I'll show you what was going on there.
It's Sunday and we have come to Bagasola's Catholic Church. They actually migrated from south of Chad because around here is predominantly Muslim. What we're trying to find out here is the role the Catholic Church playing in the refugees' life.
It was just fascinating to be there. I sat down and I just watched the whole ceremony. It was beautiful. So soon my time in Lake Chad came to an end, and I left the dusty Sahel for the red soil savannah. I arrived at the beginning of the rainy season, so welcome cloud scoured the sky and temperature dropped to high 30s, which was a major relief. I left 45 degrees and I arrived at high 30s. It felt like you just stepped out of the sauna. Just to clarify, I'm not following that lady. She just happened to walk in the same road as I did. Just to be clear. My mission in the savannah was to find the Wudabi people. The Wudabi people are one of the last remaining true nomadic cattle herders on the planet. It wasn't easy to find them because the Wudabis are constantly on the move in search for new pastures. They keep herd of longhorn zebu cattle, and they cover long distances in isolated family bands. So finding them was not an easy task. I had to search and search and search, and finally I managed to find them, they were settled in this amazing, vast, lush green plain, pure, untouched nature. The prized possession of each family is a large wooden bed, which sleeps two. So the Wudabi, this is basically their home. This bunk bed is basically one Wudabi person's home. At the bottom bunk, this is the bedroom. That's where they sleep. And on top bed, they keep their belongings, which act also as a rain shelter. The whole structure can be dismantled and erected within 45 minutes. That's why the Wudabis are so mobile. They can move all the time. Truly fascinating tribes. The Wudabi acquired some knowledge of Islam, but and they call Allah during the time of death and difficulties. But much of a religion has been melded to their more ancient animistic beliefs. And what constitutes the notion of Allah for Wudabis is quite ambiguous. They believe in bush spirits, various bush spirits, that they live in trees and wells, and they reputed to be saddened by the way that actually people treated them. I saw a Wudabi man burst into tears, crying like a baby because he saw my guide peeing against a tree. I literally couldn't believe it. Anyhow, in contrary with the tribe's religion and Islam is the tribe's sexual liberation. The Wudabi are sexually liberated nomads, where married women can take different men as a sexual partner, whether for a temporary affair or a permanent marriage. But she must leave the children with the ex-husband. This system ensures the children's place in the society while gives the Wudabi women considerable amount of flexibility and freedom and spontaneity. And there's absolutely no shame. And this practice called Teagle marriages. There's absolutely no stigma and shame attached to Teagle marriage. So they can do it really easy without any problem. But Teagle marriage can cause certain amounts of friction between the new wife and the existing ones, because new wives means less resources available to everyone, including milk and husband herds. So every year the tribes gather in a fair-like event called Gerovel, where all these different tribes, different clans, they move little by little closer to each other every day. They have a rendezvous, and they meet in one central location. And the Gerovel happens. So where Gerovel is happening is basically where the legal marriages are negotiated and male beauty is judged. So females are sitting back and male performing dances, and women can choose who they want to go out with and disappear in the bush. It's like a fair-like event. Wudhabi men, however, they are extremely vain, and you can rarely find a Wudhabi man without a mirror. They're constantly plucking their eyebrows, putting makeup, try to look beautiful, try to look amazing. They make sure their turban is like tied nicely. They spend hours in front of this mirror. They're so vain. And in preparation for Garuvel, this even heighten up, and their sort of a beauty activities goes crazy, because male beauty manifests itself in the height, the whiteness of teeth, and the eye. So in preparation to this ceremony, in battle for sexual supremacy, they try to be the best. So you see the Wudhabi men, they constantly brushing their teeth with little wooden stick, try to make sure that they're scrubbing every piece of dirt out. They make sure they get 9-10 hours of sleep to, for their eyes to look as white as possible. They constantly make sure that every single bead on their clothes are nice and tight, and they try to stretch themselves to become taller and to show themselves as tall and superior to the rest. So when the Garuvel happens, there is absolutely no shame to breaking up the marriage in Garuvel. But what is fascinating is when it comes to choosing a lover, men have little choice. It's the women who make the choice. The choice lies with women. So my guide was telling me it's all about winning a lover, even if she's married to someone else. So it's kind of fascinating to think about the 21st century, such an ancient tribe with such a modern way of thinking. And perhaps gathering like Garuvel is not only important, but also necessary for the polygamous nomadic tribes like the Wudhabi. I was really, really grateful for my time with the Wudhabi, and I was really honored that they let me in and let me experience their fascinating nomadic culture. So I'm hoping that I have provided you, given an overall idea about Chad, and perhaps provided you with an alternative narrative to what you hear in mainstream media. And my journey through Chad has been perhaps the most difficult journey I've ever experienced in my life. And in this global connected world, I still found Chad the most difficult, underdeveloped, and disconnected countries I've ever seen. However, I still found there are more things that are connecting us than disconnecting us. Thank you very much indeed.